Hello, lovelies. So people have been asking after the drive-thru revelations why I or somebody else doesn't just set up our own version of drive-thru, and then that's a fair question, I think. Some people are also saying, well, have you talked to drive-thru about these changes and how you don't like them? I think by doing it publicly, that's probably the best way to dispute these decisions, given that they're supposed to stop you criticising them publicly. It's an act of civil defiance, shall we say? But yeah, it is a valid question to ask. Why doesn't somebody set up their own site? Why do we allow drive-thru to have this massive monopoly? Plenty of people, myself included, have set up their own sites for their own products, and even using template sites like Shopify or whatever, it's relatively easy, but you've got to use certain plugins because you're doing digital downloads and other issues. Getting it set up is a bit of a ball ache, and keeping it updated is also a bit of a ball ache, and you don't really make enough money in this business to hire someone to maintain the website, unless you're something like drive-thru, where maybe you can afford to hire some people on to help you look after stuff. So in theory, you could start a site and then take some people on as it grows and work out salaries and so on from all of that. So maybe you could do that, but it's going to take a while, and it's a ball ache to set up, and it's a lot of businessy stuff that people like me aren't necessarily very good at or particularly interested in, because we like to make games, right? You've got a lot of challenges if you want to try and set up a competitor. They have massive market dominance, they have brand recognition, people go there out of habit to see what the new releases are. It's also noteworthy that there have been competitors in the past. One of them I forget the name of, but it was announced with a huge hue and cry at I believe a Gen Con, and lots of people sold on both sites for a while, but its back-end interface was like something out of the 1990s bulletin board scene. It was not great for uploading, it would often fail, and the site essentially failed. It just didn't have any polish to it. It wasn't really getting any better at a time when DrivethruRPG was getting better. Maybe you don't remember this, but RPG Now used to be a thing. That was a separate site to DrivethruRPG. It was run by different people, and then DriveThru, or One Bookshelf, then took it over and kept the sites running parallel. RPG Now focused more on the independent games, while DriveThru focused more on the larger ticket, the bigger company games, you know, the D&D and the White Wolf and the rest of that kind of thing. But then they got rid of RPG Now, and that has kind of screwed over a lot of indie games creators by taking a lot of front page real estate away from them and giving it to the pre-existing big boys. So besides people's personal sites for their own products, there is itch.io. I suppose it's not a very pretty site. It primarily exists for independent computer games and has been heavily colonized by indie RPG makers with the kind of mindset that is causing the problems at drive-thru. I don't think necessarily we're going to see a great deal of censorship over itch.io, because a lot of the indie computer games are things like furry porn and so on, but it's still, you know, do you really want to be around those people necessarily, with all the problems that they cause, the downvoting, the false reports, all the kind of stuff that we have to put up with everywhere else anyway. So right, the reason I don't set up a drive-thru competitor is primarily I'm a creative, not a business guy, not a computer guy, even though I used to do tech support, and the whole thing sounds like a huge pain in the arse. And for someone with the issues that I have and the mindset that I have, having to run that site it just sounds like a terrible idea to me. Not something for me to do. It costs money that I don't necessarily have, being a disabled independent game creator. There's a lot of costs involved, even just in the day-to-day. A lot of storage is going to be needed for this site, and it's going to have relatively low income if you compare to computer games, for example. Some of those can be huge and sprawling, but a lot of indie games are fairly small but charge a relatively big amount of money. Game books can be anywhere from a few tens of megabytes to gigabytes of storage, and PDF condensation, it's just condensing them, it's voodoo. No one really knows how it's going to work out each time you do it. So yeah, it costs money and requires a lot of storage and bandwidth and so on, and a lot of that you're going to have to account for, and a lot of us are poor, so we don't have a great deal of money to do this sort of thing. 3, any new site, especially set up by anyone in the League of Evil Gamers, LEG. So if I set one up, or James Raji set one up, or Zach Smith set one up, or RPG Pundit set one up, or any of a number of other people set up a site, it would instantly be called that's the site for Nazi gamers, or some bullshit like that. You know exactly how it goes. And even worse, if you set up a new site and you say this is a less controlled site, provided it's legal, you can have it on here, no censorship, you're going to have the Gab effect, right? The first people that are going to colonize your new platform are going to be the absolute worst dregs of humanity with the most outrageous, nasty, racist, whatever content. Now, I don't think there's necessarily a problem having nasty content on a site. It's just you don't want it to be all anyone sees when they come there. You don't want them to be flooded with hate. So yeah, that's the problem with setting up independent social platforms. You've seen it with Gab, you've seen it with places like BitChute, which is just full of far-right propaganda and so on. I believe in free expression, I believe in free speech, but you've got to have a combination of things going on. It can't be all one side or the other. I mean, that's the problem with a lot of existing sites. It's all one-sided. There's no debate, even if it's just competing designs. There's no marketplace of ideas at play, and there wouldn't be on any new site like this, because it would be flooded with assholes who would then put off any normal people coming along and using it. Next problem. Payment processors and shopfronts like Shopify have their own terms of service. They dictate what you can and you can't publish on the site. If we wanted to allow pornographic content, for example, it's a bit of a grey area, but probably that would mean having to use a particular different payment processor, if you were even allowed to do that at all, and that would put up all the costs again, and that would be worse than dealing with drive-thru and so on because of those extra costs. I mean, that's how they get you. They gouge you. And PayPal's issues with adult content and so on are also well known. And we've seen how bad reporting, erroneous reporting, can affect even big sites like YouTube that have plenty of money to throw around for lawyers. So, that's another issue. Some of this censorship, some of this control is inescapable, and yet again a massive ball ache to deal with. So if I were going to do it, and consulting is available, here's what I would do. I would target the mid-range indie market, the kinds of games and companies in that middle range that isn't currently being very well served, the kinds of people that used to do really well on RPG Now. That's what I think the target market would be for this. Not the people necessarily putting out the little chapbooks and pamphlets for free, essentially, but higher than that. So, auteur creators, low and mid-level companies, rather than the bigger ones. So not Wizards of the Coast, not whoever it is doing the White Wolf stuff these days. You know, not those necessarily the big brand names, though of course they'd be welcome to sell there, but they would be treated the same as anybody else, right? So this would be targeted at that mid-range between itch and DrivethRu, which is to my mind failing those mid-tier creators at the moment. So that would be the market niche I would go for if I were going to do this. It's got to have an easy interface, and it's got to be low maintenance. You know, it doesn't have to be a complicated interface, it doesn't have to have a lot of bells and whistles and tools and whatever, but it should be relatively easy to just log in as a creator, put in your information for your title and a thumbnail and the file, set a price, you know, that's it, right? It should be that easy, essentially. I mean, you want certain searchable things like hashtags and so on, but it's got to have an easy interface, something that looks and acts modern. You know, it should be as easy as using one of those apps that you use to sell your secondhand clothes or whatever. So that's it. That's important, I think. In terms of what content you do allow on the site, you need to have your clear rules. Something like, is it legal? And are you, or have you ever been a violent criminal? And, you know, these are the limitations that are set by our payment processors that we have no control over. As long as you conform to that, it's all good. And we won't take something down until after we've investigated it. So the opposite policy to DrivethRu, I think. That would allow you to outsource moderation, but also not allow people to abuse it. Speaking of, I think you need an adult gate. So if you're going to have adult content, I think it's only responsible to have it behind a verified account that's bought something using a credit card or whatever. That's about the best you can do for adult verification. So there's that. Any site that did come out should take less of a cut. Otherwise, I just don't think you're going to get enough people to migrate or to spend the amount of time necessary to promote your site for you. So if you want to attract companies and auteurs to sell their product, you're going to have to take less than DrivethRu does. DrivethRu takes quite a chunk. They take about as much as a normal distributor or store would take, despite not really needing to take that much. So I think there's probably room in a budget, if you have a modern low maintenance site and everything, if you have all that rest of that covered and thought about, then probably you could drop to a cut of 20 to 25% instead of the higher level that's more typical. That should be enough to get by, and it should be enough to draw some people over and make them want to sell on your site rather than elsewhere. So that's something. And I think just to keep things quick and easy, where possible, you should use existing software and storefront management tools and all the rest to make it work. Again, this is to keep it low maintenance, to farm out the tech support to somebody else. Now, if someone wants to go ahead with this, I've got a bit of seed cash stashed away. Maybe I could join up with someone who wants to do it, but I don't think it's a good idea for me or anyone else in the Evil League of Gamers. League of Evil Gamers. I don't think it's a good idea for any of us to be the front for it, because that would just kill it. It's not fair, it's not right, but if you want a site to succeed, you know, by all means have us sell on it, but it's probably not a good idea for us to front it. I do let a few people sell through my personal site, and that's already a ball ache, which is the saying for today. But I can't do that for everybody, because the reporting tools and so on are shit, and it's very hard for me to keep track of how many sales people have had of what on that site, unless I want to pay more money at the back end. So there you go. That's why I don't do it. That's why I think other people don't do it, and those are the pitfalls and issues that I see befalling anyone else trying to do it. Zang. Welcome to St. Cloud is a system-agnostic setting of atmospheric, surreal horror and investigation by Miguel Ribeiro. An isolated town set amongst forests and mountains, St. Cloud is a closed community of eccentrics and oddities. while system agnostic guideline statistics are provided for actual fucking monsters. You can get Welcome to St. Cloud at post-mort.com, lulu.com and DrivethruRPG.
This is not a time to be dismayed. This is punk rock time. This is what Joe Strummer trained you for. It is now time to go. You're a good person. That means more now than ever.